Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to do the second section of the CM covert disclosures. This is a Q&A from BVVD, who is the War Thunder game director, Vyacheslav Bulanikov. You might know BVVD from doing the Russian dev streams, and also just from doing a bunch of videos and Q&As in the past. He's one of the key figures of the Gaijin team, and should be respected for that. He is an incredibly integral part of why War Thunder is so successful, and also will continue continue his success in the future. May also continue sex, who knows. But anyway, let's get into this and let's have a look at the Q&A. The good old Q&A you can find under the CM Covert Disclosures. I'll leave a link to it in the description, and also I'll leave a bunch of timestamps so we can go through all of the different questions. As always, if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and also like the video. Let's get into it. The first thing that I do want to actually bring up is the difference between a game director and something like a community manager. A community manager is not a decision maker. They are a liaison between the community and what the devs basically say. A game director straight up directs the game. So their words are much more important than CM's words. And one of the problems that we've had in the past is the fact that community managers have said specific things at a specific time, such as earlier this year, Magazine talking about how submarines were not being worked on, even though it was very obvious that they were working on them. But Magazine saying stuff like this, and then in this Q&A, we have BVD coming out and talking about that they are actively working on them. So the problem with a community manager's words is they can say something one day and it can be completely different the next day, and it's not up to them because they are only parroting the opinion of the devs, and it may be outdated and all of that stuff. So it's much better to actually get the words from the devs themselves instead of from community managers for this fact. It isn't the fault of the community managers unless they're actively lying, which I don't think they're doing, because why would you do that? But then again, I suppose we have had a few in the past, such as one that was let go this year, which did do that. So who knows? Anyway, let's get into the questions and also the answers from good old BVD. This Q&A is focused on the game going forward, so not just next update, but also the updates afterwards. The first question is, Abandoned Factory has recently received beautiful new visuals. Are there any plans to give older maps visual updates in the future? And the answer is yes. We're planning to update other locations as well. Not in December update though, as it's too soon. But in the first or second update of next year, several updated locations are planned at once. So it looks like they've found something that works really well for them. Obviously, the Abandoned Factory update looks really nice. They added a bunch of really cool stuff to it, and also fixed a few areas which were definitely a bit of a problem in terms of playing it, mainly in kind of the south area, or I suppose like the left area now. They have definitely improved the flow of stuff there. I generally feel like the map looks really lovely, and I'm hoping that they do it to a lot of other maps. Hopefully we can also see some other maps back, such as the Fortress map, or the White Rock Fortress. I want to see what the updated version of that looks like. And maybe we could start updating a few others, such as Mozdok, for example, which has been stale and also broken for a while, since they have had to redline a lot of areas of it. Then, the next question. War Thunder is constantly expanding with new vehicles from other nations, which are implemented into nations already in the game. But are there any plans for separate standalone nations in the future, in addition to the 10 already present in the game? And the answer is yes, we have plans for separate new nations, but next year we'll focus on filling the gaps in existing trees, including adding subtrees of other nations to them, and adding new types of vehicles. So, as we've talked about in War Thunder in the past, these plans for adding stuff are not just on an update-by-update basis. You have a 5-year plan, you probably have a 3-year plan, maybe even a 10-year plan. And then also you have what are going to come out in the most recent updates. It takes quite a long time to get a vehicle into the game, at least like sometimes 6 months in terms of modeling, in terms of, dev time, and in terms of adding it in. Same with stuff like mechanics, which can take even longer. These processes are a very, very expansive and long time, right? So something like that has to be planned out pretty meticulously, which is what the team does. Now, when it comes to this answer, it makes me kind of sad. I have talked about in the past, I have no interest in independent nations when it comes to the game. I feel like we have maxed out. I think Israel itself was a stretch, but I feel like they should add all of the nations that they want to add to the tech trees that already exist. New nations would just be a far cry from the power of the other nations. And since we have a real problem with density in terms of players, so meaning that a lot of players, vast majority of players, only play 10 or 20% of the game, adding more nations and kind of moving players across it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So for me, I hope that they change this idea, and I hope they go more to the sub-nation stuff. Now, they have said that next year they'll focus on filling gaps in existing tech trees, including adding sub-trees of other nations to them. So maybe we could get some Romania in there, maybe we could get some more South African airplanes to Britain, who knows? And also new types of vehicles, which I don't even know what new types of vehicles that they can add. Is it finally time for the bridge layer, guys? Is it finally time? Is it finally time for the bridge layer? I'm ready. Let's go. I'm going to be an absolute crazy player on Poland. I'm gonna hit that button and make that bridge huge. But yeah, so there are plans for separate nations. Remember, there was a bunch of leaks a little bit ago talking about these nations. Maybe we can talk about them in depth in the future. But at least right now, they are focusing on filling the existing trees, which is fantastic because that should be the main goal. The next question is, it has been a while since there was any information surrounding World War Mode. What are the plans for this mode? Will it come back in some capacity? And the answer is we're developing a new World War mode. I hope we can tell you more about it in early 2025. Yeah, so the Iran-Iraq War World War mode, which was leaked in the last update, wouldn't be a surprise if it's that's being talked about. The major problem I have with World War mode is the competitive nature of it and how you can just kind of stack teams and how there just isn't enough people who actually care about it to be able to make it more of a standard ecosystem. The other problem with it is when it's a 1 versus 1 side. So what I mean by this is Enlisted had this problem as well with its campaigns. It's why it's had to change its matchmaking system completely. Before, the way that Enlisted worked is you had individual campaigns, and then you had each side of that campaign. You could pick which side that you wanted to play, and then what would happen is people would just pick the winningness side of that campaign, and then nobody would play the other side. This meant that you had literally no people to play against, so you would just play against AI and just run over them. And whenever a person came to that campaign and played that side that was getting run over, they went, oh, I'm getting run over, and then they went to go play something else. That's why they had to shift the matchmaking system back to a BR system. World War Mode has exactly the same problem, where once people figure out which side is better, if it is on the competitive side of things, or if it is any of that area, then what ends up happening is everybody just plays that side. And it's usually fundamentally broken because of some mechanic that they've added, which happened in 3 seasons already. So yeah, unfortunately, it's a system that doesn't work. There are many different things that need to be added. A practice mode would be fantastic. A way of doing mock matches as well. Not everything having to be ultra competitive all the time, especially in specific time periods to get people together. So hopefully we can see some of these things added. We'll have to see as it goes on. Who knows at the end of the day. The next question is, with the addition of the F-117 being a very cool but novelty aircraft, will we see more additions like this, such as interesting vehicles that wouldn't fit too well into the meta? We've had vehicles that don't fit into the meta very well anyway before the F-117. I know people always focus on the F-117 because it's like the newest one, but we've had these forever that have been added into the game as kind of like one-off wacko weird vehicles. The answer, these types of aircraft that are not very well fitting into the meta cannot be a regular addition to the game, since we try to please as many players as possible with the updates. but these types of vehicles will appear from time to time, including some interesting things that are already in the plans for 2025. Well, usually these types of vehicles are put as event vehicles. You know, the Churchill Avery, for example, from this year is kind of in that novelty area too. It's something that doesn't really work very well. It's something that's a little bit of fun, and generally you can go back to have a nice time. The problem with the F-117 is it's completely worthless unless you're in some very, very specific circumstances. So actually grinding it out is a bit of a problem. The F-117 itself hopefully will open the door to more vehicles, mainly things that people will start thinking about now, and I'm hoping that that's what happens, but it's not like a one-off. And I know we're focusing on it, but there have been plenty of vehicles in War Thunder's history that have been added that really aren't very good at anything. Then we have the next question. AI ticket bleed is detrimental to ARB as the game can end without direct player input. Oh, here we go again. And some AI aircraft are more effective than others. That is something that needs to be addressed. Could the impact of AI aircraft be capped to a certain amount of tickets? That way players would have to actively end the game themselves. The answer: we monitor the average time of game sessions in different locations, and if it stands out in one direction, we adjust the logic in the mission. However, in our experience, very few game sessions in RB end with the destruction of ground vehicles, and after adding the logic of AI attack aircraft, the average time of missions in which this logic was added increased, not decreased, since players began to spend time hunting for such AI targets. However, we do not exclude the possibility of bugs with asymmetric ticket bleed due to AI actions, so if you have specific examples of such problems, we'd be grateful for a completed report here. Yeah, generally when you have a look at the way that the AI works, you can actually just sit there and watch them, right? You can set up custom maps and you can watch the different types of AI aircraft, run a bunch of simulations basically, and go and have a look and then send your reports in. Because it does feel like certain AI attack aircraft are much more useful than others, especially on certain maps. There are also certain maps where the AI aircraft just run into the ground. There's a lot of A4s that end up doing that quite a lot. But the main problem that I feel like people have with this is seeing War Thunder as a PvP game. So War Thunder, the PvP part is an element, but just like a lot of other Gaijin games, the PvPvE part is also an element, and this is something that they're actually doing in their kind of new Tarkov-esque game too, where it isn't, you're not just fighting another enemy who's another player, you are also fighting in a grandiose battle, and that's something that I've always enjoyed about stuff like a realistic, arcade, and simulator. It feels like you're a cog in a machine, and if you do more for that machine, you can expand that area, and that to me is actually really cool, and I'm very, very happy that they've ended up doing that. The problem is, of course, people who don't want to play it like that. They want to play it as a PvP game mode, and that's it. They don't want to play in terms of the tactical side of things. Now, the fact is that's never going to happen unless you go play tournaments, and that is basically where the PvP stuff is. But in standard matchmaking, that's never going to be the case. That's not going to be how people play this stuff. That's never going to happen, unfortunately. So what you have to do if you're playing in these areas is you have to take account of the AI aircraft. You have to take account of the AI ground vehicles. And if you feel like you are losing to AI aircraft hitting the ground, then once you've won that initial battle, which is, of course, the main focus against the players, you then have to target the AI aircraft and get them out of the air, and then go back to the airfield reset and then do it again. Because that's how you win these matches, right? It isn't just a PvP setup, you also have the fact that the AI aircraft is a part of it. So once you realize that, and once you start dealing with that, then you'll be fine. The problem, as always, is, of course, when people don't want to do that because it's not something they want to do. Well, do you want the game to be able to modify to everybody's different opinions, or do you need it where instead it's kind of like a foundation and you have to manipulate yourself around it? And that is the hard thing, right? That is the hard thing in general for people. The next question is, the roadmap was an excellent way to see what is planned to come. Are there any plans for a 2025 roadmap? Yeah, we'll see. The answer is we used to gather previous roadmaps when the general plan for changing the game dedicated to one goal was very long and consisted of many steps, and we wanted everyone to see the general goal and progress towards it. And now there are many changes in the works aimed at improving the game in different directions, on different fronts, both improving stability and first of all updating the game's graphics, and of course work on improving the game based on your reports and feedback. We plan to regularly cover the progress of development and report on our plans for implementing certain features and adding vehicles, and in the future we may return to the previous roadmap format. So basically no, they're not going to. As for the current roadmap, we plan to complete most of the remaining parts before the second major update in 2025. Now, this answer is very PR. I'm going to be very honest with you. This answer came straight from a PR department. The reason why they implemented the roadmap in the way that they have done it now is because the game, War Thunder, was heavily review bombed on Steam by a lot of people, and Gaijin needed to find a way of communicating what they were working on because people felt like they weren't being heard and they didn't know what was happening. So that's where the roadmap came from last year. They previously did roadmaps in War Thunder, but they came out after they came out after the massive amount of things were added. So you can actually find these from like 2016, 2017. They came out at the end of the year and more talked about what they had already done and maybe one feature that they were working on. The current type of roadmap that we see here, the 2023 and 2024 one, was sparked because of that Steam stuff and because of general annoyance in the community. So Gaijin decided, hey, let's let you know what's going on. They've even written articles about this last year. You cannot then turn around and say something like this, talking about the previous years where you didn't do roadmaps like that. You actually did them after the fact when, these things were going on. So yeah, and also this idea of a general plan of what you're working on. I hope that, the other way of reading this is to say, okay, so in the past you had a general plan of what's going on, and now when it comes to this, that isn't it. You actually have millions of sparks all over the place, which is not as general, which is fine, but it's not a great reading when you go from, so we had a structured plan over here and we wanted to let you know what's going on, and now it's more whiz bang bang bong and everything all over the place, right? But yeah, it will be sad if the roadmap doesn't come back in 2025, even if it's just a very generalized one, which is going on. I think they've been burnt quite hard about this year's roadmap, because let's be honest, they are way behind compared to what they said that they were going to be able to do. They probably ran into a bunch of issues, they probably ran into a bunch of problems, and that sucks at the end of the day. That really, really sucks. But also, it is a part of it, When you put out a roadmap and you don't hit the goals on the roadmap, people are going to criticize you for not hitting the goals. This is why a lot of companies don't do roadmaps in this way, because it leads to aggression, it leads to annoyance, and it leads to problems. And that sucks, if we're honest. Like, it really, really does suck, because it puts extra pressure on the devs, and all the devs should do is focus on what they're focusing on, and whenever the stuff comes, it comes, and people will enjoy it. But for some reason, there's now this culture where people have to always go on about, hey, this is coming, that is coming, you need to hear about this, you need to look at this, and people get constantly agitated about what goes on. It must suck being paid tons of money to be able to develop a game and also not hit your targets. Hopefully at some point that can happen. But yeah, it would be nice to see a roadmap in 2025. I doubt we will see one because of, as I said, the problems with this year's. They still haven't completed a bunch of the stuff they were supposed to complete in the summer. The next question, I feel like, is going to get people a lot of interesting opinions. In ground realistic, top attack aircraft are capable of dominating ground vehicles for the most part. Are there any plans to do something about this in 2025? Well, hopefully. According to our data, the balance of the top ranks of ground battles is noticeably shifted towards aviation and helicopters. You don't say! You don't say. And this balance has become even worse with the introduction of top aircraft this year. Really? No way. Oh my god. Crazy. Wow. And I don't even have a statistics board. The situation where aircraft can attack tanks from a safe distance with impunity makes gameplay more boring for aviation. Oh yeah, it's crazy boring. And less fair for ground vehicles. Yeah, you could say that. A similar situation is with helicopters equipped with long-range fast ATGMs or fire and forget ATGMs. Yeah, exactly. 2 clicks and bang bang. By the way, if you want to see my opinion on this, you can watch the CAS Apocalypse video that I did maybe a week or 2 ago now, where it goes over a replay where all of these things are happening. To counter these types of threats, more powerful systems are needed. God damn it, man. To have the ability to fire at several targets at once, and a wide search sector in both azimuth and elevation. The most advanced SAM system currently presented in the game only partially meets these requirements, so we'll move towards heavier systems for all nations, including those components of which are located on several chassis. Of course, we'll have to solve the problem of controlling these types of SAM systems, but we're already having thoughts on the matter. Oh, fantastic. I'm glad you're having thoughts on the matter, because this has only been a problem for over a year. But I'm glad that now we're having thoughts. Now we have the statistics. Now we have the data. Now it's time to actually do this. Now it's time to address an issue that's been going on for at least a year and a half. Okay? Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that we're here. I'm glad that we're here. I'm glad that we're happy. I'm glad we're all hugging, and I'm glad we're finally realizing that this is a problem. In turn, there are plans to add new capabilities for aircraft. And while we do not consider anti-radiation missiles a priority and necessity, more advanced capabilities of ESM from onboard an aircraft, i.e. more accurate determination of the active radar position, are in our fairly close plans. Yep, you should definitely make aircraft even more powerful. That's the way to do it. You know what you need to do? Hi, hey, it's me. Hi, Tech, over here. Right, I got a real simple solution to this for the time being while you're doing all this stuff. Increase the fucking spawn costs. Increase them. You obviously have the data. You've just said it here that this is a problem. Increase the damn spawn costs in the meantime while you find the solution that you are still discussing. So you are not at the point of even thinking about implementation. Okay? And once again, matching power with power does not work. It has never worked in War Thunder history, and it will never work in the future. Increase the damn spawn costs. Come on. You can do it. It's very easy. Just put number up a little bit. And then see what happens. See how many turn up. That video, that CAS Apocalypse video, shows exactly the problem. It isn't the fact that you have, you know, these aircraft with these crazy munitions. It's the fact that you can get a cap and an assist, and you can get in a fully loaded helicopter. You can get in a fully loaded plane, and you can just go and hammer the enemy with it over and over and over again. And then you can use those kills that you got in that plane to then spawn in another plane and do exactly the same thing. And you can do it from spawn. You can literally spawn and fire and spawn and fire and then turn off. So even if you add these systems in that are better at defending these situations, it doesn't matter, because by the time they have their missile fired off, what is happening is they have a missile coming towards them. And because you have single spawn maps, which are basically lanes, which for some, I don't even know who decided this, but someone over the last few years decided that every map has to be a corridor that you just die in, like a road of death. You know, from good old like World War II or something like that. For some reason, somebody looked at Kasserine Pass and thought it would be great if every map was like that at high tier. Or they thought it would be great that every map is just a snow map, so therefore you can just see things all over the place. Or whoever decided to redesign Wallonia decided that everybody had to spawn in exactly the same place and be spawn camped from 4 or 5 or 6 different angles, and you can't even pressure those areas at the start of the game, so you just get hammered from them. Somebody decided all of these things, and it culminated in this mess that you have now at the highest echelon of the game. It is absolutely sickening playing that area, and the idea that active radar homing missiles or stuff such as ESMs are ever going to make a difference, it won't. You just need to increase the spawn cost. What happened to simple solutions to problems? Why can't we do this? Why can't we take whoever decided that the profiles needed to be more simplistic and apply them to this problem, okay? Because you have proven in this answer that there is a big problem, and the fact that you have to admit that there is this big problem here, you need to fix it quickly, or the whole thing goes kaput. Because you are right, there is no point right now in playing top tier ground. You do not play top tier ground. You play as a pawn to get annihilated by somebody who is in an aircraft. That is what happens in the vast majority of situations. And now that you've said all this, you've emboldened people to do that more, because that is what's the most, that's what's the most effective. You need to throw in some balance patches now. We can't wait for new machines to come in. That's not how this can work, because the problem is already here and you have caused it. You are straight up saying, we know we caused this issue like 2 years ago, but don't worry, we'll fix it next year. Well, that's 3 years. That's 3 years that people have had to deal with this issue. That would not be allowed in any other setup. It just wouldn't be. So come on, have a think. Let's get it sorted. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.